What's up, guys, and welcome to the weekly Q&A. Yesterday, Molly got me my very own Biggs helmet for an early birthday present, so I just had to show it off in a video and say thank you to Molly. And I also need to say a quick thank you to Rhys Davies, who gave a very generous donation of $50 on Patreon. So thank you so much, Rhys. But all that said, let's get into questions now. First question of the week goes to Raymond Lee, who asks where Boba and Jango Fett fit into Mandalorian culture. In Legends, they were always Mandalorian, but in canon, Olmec says they're not Mandalorian, so what gives? I actually have a theory on this based on the Legacy of Mandalore Rebels Recon episode. In it, they talk about Mandalore and the systems and planets that make up their territory, and how they basically have different houses and families, very much like Game of Thrones or Westeros. And Dave Filoni specifically says that some of the Mandalorian houses see themselves as more rightly Mandalorian than others. So when Olmec is saying that Jango Fett is not a Mandalorian and he just stole Mandalorian armor, there are two possibilities. One is that, yeah, he is telling the truth and Jango Fett is not Mandalorian and he just took up armor. That is possible if we take him at his word. But I kind of don't want to let go of the fact that Jango and Boba are Mandalorians. So I'm going to choose for now to interpret Olmec's words as him just being snooty and pompous and saying, those guys aren't real Mandalorians. No, they're not Mandalorians. We are Mandalorians. That's kind of how I'm interpreting it for now. I want to make that clear that it's just my own headcanon. It's a theory that maybe they'll touch on that down the line because I always grew up thinking Boba Fett's a Mandalorian, and then to all of a sudden have that change, it's strange to me. So I'm trying to hold on to that, but I think really the more accurate thing is to take Olmec at his word, for now at least, and I guess say that Jango and Boba Fett aren't really Mandalorians. But we're just going to have to wait and see if this whole different houses and the elitism of Olmec or someone like the Vizslas, if that's going to come into play in Boba Fett's story down the line. With all the rumors of the theatrical releases of the original trilogy coming to Blu-ray, Noah Lopez wants to know if I think they're true or if it's ever going to happen. I do, of course, very much hope that at some point they come out on Blu-ray. I'm not getting my hopes up for this year. I do think it kind of makes sense, what with it being the 40th year anniversary, and they're going to have a big celebration panel where it would be very cool if they revealed that, but I'm not going to give my hopes up until Lucasfilm announces it, because this rumor's been floating around for forever. And I do think it's going to happen at some point. I know Fox is kind of standing in the way, or is at least a hurdle right now. And also Lucas has always said that the only existing film prints are the special editions now, that they just lost the original cuts, which I always thought was kind of bullcrap. But even if that is true, if fans can go through and make fan edits and despecialize everything, I mean, think what ILM could do. They could very easily take the special edition, cut out the new scenes, and probably digitally remove all of the digital editions. Just get it as close to the original as you possibly can. I would be happy with that. So it's definitely something that I think they can do, and I'm sure they know it would make them boatloads of money. So I think it'll happen someday. I'm just not going to say, oh, it's definitely happening at Celebration. John Peterson asks a question about a chapter in Aftermath Empire's End. So technically, it's very, very light spoilers ahead. It's not really connected to the main plot of the story. It's one of the interludes. But in case you want to dodge any spoilers at all, I'll put up a time code so you can skip. Basically, the question is involving a chapter where members of the Church of the Force are returning Kyber crystals back to a cave on Christophsis, where they were originally taken. And while inside this cave, the final surviving member of the church, he sees the cave glowing with blue and green and red crystals. But if these are in the walls as they are described, how can that be? Because the crystals don't take on a color until they are attuned to a Jedi or they're bled by a Sith. So why are they glowing? Honestly, I think that the intent of the chapter was just to write something visual and cool and not really establish anything new with Kyber crystal lore, and it might not even be accurate. So again, I'm going to kind of make my own headcanon here and say that maybe, this church member, he was about to die. So maybe the Force was just kind of showing him something cool as he went, as like a thank you for returning the crystals. Or maybe because he had a bunch of crystals in this case, maybe the Kyber crystals in the walls were reacting to just the Force energies gathered by this massive collection of crystals. And again, like, it could be a thank you from the Force. I don't know. Again, I just think it was more meant to be a very visually cool thing to imagine rather than anything thought about and establishing new lore. So now I'm forced to kind of just have to make up a reason for why they did that, and that's my best guess. Bear wants to know if I think the Galactic Civil War ended too quickly in canon, because in Legends it went on for a good long while. I'm okay with the way it ended and it wrapped up in Aftermath Empire's End. So the war did officially end, but there are mentions of Imperial holdouts and warlords that are still out there that are refusing to stop fighting. So Imperial villains might not be done. I think that's a fair compromise, because I've already read story after story about the Galactic Civil War from Legends, and I'm okay with them exploring something new and just like wrapping it up in a new and exciting way. I thought the Battle of Jakku was handled very well, and it was very interesting and just different. So I'm okay with that. And Chuck Wendig still kind of left it open for, hey, if we want to do a Warlord Zinj story, like, he could be one of those Imperial holdouts. We could still do stuff like that if people choose to. They don't necessarily have to go in that direction, but they could. So I'm glad that they're kind of going in a new direction, and I'm interested to see what kind of antagonists the stories are going to have that take place in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, because there's 30 years there where technically the Empire is done, and we could explore all kinds of new villains that pop up, like maybe Black Sun crime lords or like the Hutts. I mean, they kind of alluded to a bunch of criminal, I guess, gatherings, or like a shadow war, they called it, was all the criminal underworld leaders are kind of vying for power, and they could maybe band together, or just one of them could come out on top and be a major threat. Something like that. Maybe Prince Shizor could come back. Who knows? Like, I'm glad that it could really go anywhere at this point. Rhys Davies asks what happened to Commander Cody after Order 66. Well, in Legends, he went on to train stormtroopers, and I imagine he's doing something similar in canon, but we haven't heard yet. What I want is for him to show up in Star Wars Rebels, because a confrontation between him and Rex would be incredible. It'd be very conflicted, because both of them fought side by side during the Clone Wars, and now they're on opposite sides. Like, would they be happy to see each other? Would they be angry with each other? I want to know. And I really hope they tell that in some story at some point. That's it for patron questions. If you're a patron and you didn't see your question answered here, as always, just go over to Patreon and I left you a written response. If you're not a patron, you can learn more by following the link in the description. Just $1 a month will get you access to some extra Star Wars Explained goodies, including a monthly giveaway of a year-long subscription to Smuggler's Bounty, and the combined donations really go a long way in helping support the channel. On to YouTube questions. Oliver P. Attila asks why Han didn't pay off Jabba the Hutt in between episodes 4 and 5. I have asked myself that question over and over again. Like, do they not have space PayPal? Could he not have just wired him the money immediately? I guess in 1977, like, that thought was so far gone from anyone's minds that would ever be a possibility that they didn't even put it in Star Wars. So it was like he had to physically deliver the money. And I guess that's still true. But what I think from the canon stories that have been told so far, he had repairs that he had to do on the Falcon. Like, it just, for whatever reason, couldn't even make it to Tatooine so he could pay him off. They've mentioned that before. It sounds like he also either gambled some of the money away, or he had some run-ins with some bounty hunters. I know that happened in Smuggler's Run. And he at least offered to pay them the money he was going to use to pay Jabba. So it sounds like it's a mixture of just literally being unable to get there and having to pay off bounty hunters, or just being foolish with the money and thinking like, oh, well, I have 17,000 credits and maybe I can make some more using that, and then he lost it. So really, it's all just a bunch of hand waving to make a compelling enough reason for why he didn't pay him off. But I always thought that that was so strange that he didn't do that. Ming Mong wants to know why Rex was never promoted to commander. And again, we don't really know, so I'm going to have to go speculation, headcanon here, but there are a ton of examples throughout like real world history of military leaders that refused promotions because they were happy doing what they were doing already. So maybe Rex, I mean, I assume he had the military career that he would have been offered the position of commander. Maybe he liked being a captain. Maybe he liked being closer with his troops, fighting side by side with Anakin, and he just turned the promotion down. Although, I don't think things would have really changed for him that much, because, I mean, Commander Cody was doing pretty much the same thing he was. So, to me, like, I forget that he's a captain sometimes, because he just seems like a commander. But that's, I guess, my own headcanon. I'm gonna assume that someone at some point was like, would you like to be a commander? And he said, no thanks. Seamus Malloy asks why Palpatine had to send holo messages to the clone commanders when seemingly, even though they didn't then relay that message, every clone trooper kind of knew to attack the Jedi. Like, how did that all go down? I think, and again, I'm going to have to speculate here, but I think that the holo messages were really just for the audience to really understand what was happening. Palpatine probably didn't have to send a message to all the clone commanders. He probably could have just flicked a switch and had the inhibitor chips go off. But for the audience to understand, he sent messages. Or, alternatively, maybe he sends a message to a clone commander and then all of the troopers under their command, like all of their chips maybe activate when the clone commander chip activates. I don't know. I'm kind of making stuff up, but really I think the only purpose of the message was to really clarify things for the audience. Supreme Leader Smeagol wants to know what I would think of an anthology movie covering the origin of the Jedi and the Republic. I would of course watch something like that, but I doubt we're going to see anything like it for a long time. I think that Disney is going to have to stick to the timeline that is already established. So we probably aren't going to go before The Phantom Menace. We're probably not going to go even after Return of the Jedi for a good long while as far as films go. Because most of the world is not like me or you guys, the subscriber to this channel. Most of the world loves a good Star Wars movie, but they don't read the books, they don't read the comics. So Disney needs to make the films accessible to everyone. And they're not gonna just all of a sudden in 2020, they're not gonna jump 35,000 years into the past to cover the origin of the Jedi, because people would be so confused. We wouldn't be, but they would be. And Disney wants to make sure they're making their $4 billion back right away. So I would guess that they're going to kind of widen the net slowly, very slowly, and we might get like an old Republic, maybe 1,000, 4,000 years prior. We might get one of those down the line. And then as the world of Star Wars continues to grow through just the films, they can expand that time zone that they explore. But for the immediate future, I don't think anything like that is going to happen for a long time. Han and Boba 310 asks what I think the next animated TV series is going to be about. As you might have heard, Star Wars recently trademarked Star Wars Rivals. That could be a mobile game. It could be the TV series. It could go either way, really. I think it does kind of sound like a mobile game once someone pointed that out, but let's pretend that it is the name of the TV series. I think that sounds kind of like bounty hunters to me. Maybe we'd follow a different bounty hunter every episode, but they're really all trying to catch the same bounty every episode or something like that. I just see all of the bounty hunters as rivals that occasionally work together. So I could see something along those lines happening. And plus, we don't really know what happened to Cad Bane or Boba Fett in the Clone Wars. Season 7, they were supposed to have their own story arc. They could bring that back and kind of continue that story and bring in all the other bounty hunters. And bounty hunters are popular, so I could see that being a successful TV show. That's all the time I have for questions today. If you want to leave one for next week's Q&A, just put it in the comments of this video or head over to Patreon where we have a weekly comment thread. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. As always, thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.